Merhaba arkadaşlar. Sizlerle bu haftaki dersimizin konusunu işleyeceğiz. Dersimizin konusu The Novel of the Big House. Umarım her biriniz iyisinizdir. Kendinize dikkat ediniz. Evet. The term big house, an ambivalently derisive expression in Ireland, refers to a country mansion. So it is a country mansion, not always so very big, but typically owned by a Protestant Anglo-Irish family, presiding over a substantial agricultural acreage leased out to Catholic tenants who worked the land. As rural centers of political power and wealth in Ireland, most big houses occupied property confiscated from native Catholic families in the 16th and 17th centuries. Their presence in the landscape, unlike that of England's great houses, long asserted the political and economic ascendancy of a remote colonial power structure. Whereas by the 19th century, the English country mansion could be incorporated into a triumphal concept of national heritage for most of Ireland's population. Ascendancy houses signaled division, not community. In a colonial country, such division reflected not just the typical disparities of class and wealth between landlords and tenants, but also difference of political allegiance, ethnicity, religion, and language. Just underline those words. Thus, in a speech advocating the 1800 Act of Union, Lord Clare notoriously described Irish landlords as hemmed in on every side by the old inhabitants of the island, brooding over their discontents in sullen indignation. Ireland's architectural flowering during the 18th century suggests the eagerness of a newly secure Anglo-Irish Protestant oligarchy to display in its wealth and power. So oligarchy started, and indeed its permanence through a classically inflected building program. This rapid spread of ascendancy, agriculture, architecture, in the classical mode indicates that parts of Ireland were being visually transformed into replicas of an England. So dikkat ederseniz artık yavaş yavaş binaların görüntüleri bile tıpkı İngiltere'deki gibi oluyor. That was increasingly imagining itself as the modern version of the imperial Roman state. But even in its grandest and most rationalized 18th century form, the wide-spreading Palladian edifice with a center block joined to subordinate wings, rural big houses adapted themselves to local needs. Değişik türde artık ev türleri çıkıyor ortaya. In Ireland, the wings of a Palladian mansion were as likely to be occupied by offices and farm buildings and as reception rooms. Other houses reflecting centuries of acquisition by improving landlords grew more organically as medieval fortresses were expanded and embellished with Gothic or classical additions. A severely vertical rather than horizontal Georgian house, that was a type, was a more characteristic form of classical 18th century estate architecture. 3 stories tall with 5 to 7 bays, such smaller homes were built as Elizabethan Bowen notes, to house a family, its dependents, a modest number of guests. Significant late 19th and 20th century fiction by Somerville and Ross, George Moore and Elizabeth Bowen emerged from these austere country seats. Novels about the big house survived as a stubbornly persistent genre in Irish fiction, even as 19th century landed estates faced growing social and financial marginality. Emerging as a national literary form in 1800, with Maria Edgeworth's slyly subversive depiction of gentry decline in Castle Rackrent, in our previous lesson we saw, they continued to appear long after political independence in 1922. Women writing from within ascendancy society and a range of largely middle-class male authors were to transform the subject matter of domestic gentry life, it was put into the novels, into an insistently, if often covertly, political fiction. These novels flourished in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. A period of precipitous ascendancy, collapse under the assault of new land laws and emerging nationalism. Thus, for some critics, writing alike from nationalist and unionist perspectives, the genre necessarily constitutes a nostalgic or reactionary form, rooted in elegiac longings for a flattened hierarchical reciprocity characterizing British country house literature from Ben Jonson's to Penhurst. Evelyn was Brideshead revisited also. Although a conservative rural ideology surfaces in many of the works examined here, most Anglo-Irish big house novels are far from elegiac, typically directing considerable irony toward an improvident class of social and economic losers. Attempts to place this fiction into the nostalgic Anglophone tradition of a wider country house literature or into the context of W. B. Yeats' revivalist yearning for an 18th century Anglo-Irish hegemony mistakenly sentimentalize what is, for the most part, a fiercely self-lacerating genre.